New Zealand has set some incredibly ambitious targets for its future. Net zero emissions by 2050, and maybe even more pressing, 100% renewable electricity by 2030. That is a massive nation-defining transition. But, setting targets is the easy part. It's the mapping, the actual how-to, that's the real heavy lifting. Today, we're undertaking a deep dive into an important new source of research that tries to do exactly that. We're focusing on the paper titled Optimizing New Zealand's Energy Transition, introducing Remix NZ's insights into transition pathways and green hydrogen export scenarios. This study introduces a really highly detailed new model to map out New Zealand's energy future.
And that level of detail is exactly why this is so critical. If you've been following New Zealand's progress, you'll know that peer-reviewed studies on this transition have been, well, pretty scarce. And the ones that do exist, they often lack the resolution you need to model a modern power system.
What do you mean by resolution, exactly?
I mean, they don't look at things hour by hour or, region by region.
Right.
Without that level of detail, you just can't model the integration of variable renewables like solar and wind properly.
So the big national reports kind of smooth over all the tricky real-world challenges.
They do. It's a huge blind spot. So to fix this, the researchers introduced Remix NZ. You can think of it as a next-gen energy model tailored specifically for New Zealand. It captures hourly time steps and breaks the country down into 11 regions, 8 on the North Island, 3 on the South, all connected by that crucial HVDC link. Its goal is least cost optimization.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a super granular model designed to find the cheapest way to get to net zero. So what does it actually project for New Zealand? Because I've seen the headline numbers and they are just staggering.
They absolutely are,
Yeah.
and this is where we have to start. The model projects a simply stunning growth requirement. New Zealand needs to increase its installed power generation capacity by up to 13 times by 2050.
13 times. Wow. When you hear that, you have to ask, is the system just expanding or is it being completely replaced? Because 13x is a total system overhaul.
It's the latter. To put a number on it, capacity has to grow from about 10 gigawatts in 2020 to an enormous 130 gigawatts by 2050.
And what's driving that? It can't just be population growth.
No, not at all. It's driven by the model's core assumption of full sector coupling and mass electrification.
Meaning it's not just the power grid anymore, it's everything. Transport, home heating, industry,
Yeah.
all of it shifting to electricity.
Exactly, or to power to X fuels like hydrogen. Once you model the entire economy shifting its energy source, the scale just explodes. And this is where the model really departs from earlier thinking. Total electricity demand grows from around 40 terawatt hours in 2020 to 215 by 2050.
And that just blows the older government reports out of the water, doesn't it? I remember reports like the EDGS projected, maybe 4 to 15 GW of new capacity?
Right. And the difference is that those reports were only looking at limited electrification. The Remix NZ study, because it mandates full decarbonization across all sectors, shows the realistic, the massive build-out that's actually needed. It's an honest look at the problem.
An honest look that leads to the next big question. Cost. How do you pay for building 120 gigawatts of new infrastructure? Isn't that just an insurmountable bill?
You'd think so, but the model finds that while the upfront investment is huge, the total annual system costs are actually manageable. They go from about $2.5 billion in 2020 to $6 billion by 2050. But here's the kicker, the big payoff. Fuel costs, which you spend on imported fossil fuels, basically drop to zero.
So you're trading a volatile recurring cost for a stable one-time investment in infrastructure.
Precisely. Fuel costs fall from making up 75% of the system cost in 2020 to just 2% by 2050. You stop sending money overseas for oil and gas and build a domestic clean energy system instead. The economics work.
That is a profound structural change, and it leads to another one. New Zealand is famous for being a hydro nation, but this study suggests that whole identity is about to change. And this is where it gets really interesting. What's the new backbone?
Solar. It completely flips the script. By 2050, solar PV is projected to provide over 65% of the country's electricity. We're talking 105 gigawatts of installed capacity. Solar becomes the dominant force.
105 gigawatts. That sounds radical. Does New Zealand even have the solar resource for that? You don't exactly picture it as a sun-drenched desert.
It's a common misconception. This study shows New Zealand has a really solid solar resource. Its global horizontal irradiance, or GHI, is between 1,200 and 1,500 kilowatt hours per square meter. That's actually better than Germany.
That puts it in perspective. Germany had, over 80 gigawatts installed by the end of 2023? So if New Zealand has a better resource, 105 gigawatt is physically possible.
Absolutely possible. Now, solar dominates, but wind is the number 2, providing over 19% of generation. And that leaves hydropower. Its relative share drops to around 10% of annual generation.
So hydro isn't gone, but its job completely changes.
Exactly. It shifts from being the baseload workhorse to being this crucial, flexible balancing tool. Its value isn't just in raw energy volume anymore, it's in its ability to respond instantly.
And what about fossil fuels? In the cheapest pathway, does the model still keep some gas plants around for backup? That's what you usually hear.
Not really, no. And this is a powerful finding. The model shows coal is gone by 2030, and gas is almost entirely phased out. The least cost pathway gets you to near 100% renewables on its own.
Without needing a carbon tax to push it?
Right. The economics of renewables and storage are just that good now.
Okay, but a system that's almost entirely solar and wind needs a ton of flexibility, which brings us right to storage. How much is needed to back all this up?
The model calls for about 4,850 gigawatt hours of total electricity storage capacity by 2050. But here's New Zealand's huge, massive advantage. Its existing hydropower reservoirs already provide about 4,200 gigawatt hours of that.
Wow, so most of the huge energy volume for long-term storage is already there. That's an incredible head start. They only need to build an additional 650 GWh. How do they fill that gap?
It's filled mainly by two things. Batteries, which add about 170 to 190 GWh, and then hydrogen storage, which makes up the rest, around 370 to 460 GWh. But it's how they work together that's key.
Walk us through that, because the difference between GWH and GW can get confusing.
Think of it like this. GWH, gigawatt hours, is the size of your energy tank. It's how much you can store. GW, gigawatts, is the power. It's how fast you can empty or fill that tank.
So the size of a car's fuel tank versus the speed of the pump.
Perfect analogy. Batteries have smaller tanks, smaller GWH, but they have incredible power, incredible speed. They're projected to have 48 GW of power capacity by 2050.
So they're the super fast pumps for short bursts.
Exactly. They're perfect for managing those sharp evening peaks when the sun goes down and everyone gets home. In fact, by 2050, the batteries will have double the annual energy throughput of the hydro dams. They do all the daily heavy lifting.
And the hydro reservoirs, what's their new job?
They become the great seasonal balancers.
Yeah.
They provide that huge volume of energy needed to get through long periods of low sun or wind. And hydrogen storage fits in between, providing that medium duration backup, which is especially vital now that big projects like the Lake Onslow pumped hydro scheme are off the table.
It's a really sophisticated system then. Hydro for the seasons, batteries for the daily peaks, and hydrogen plugging the gap. Okay, let's pivot to the bigger economic question the study looked at. Can New Zealand use all this green energy to become an exporter?
They modeled that exact question. Specifically, they looked at exporting green hydrogen derivatives, so-called e-fuels, to partners like the Pacific Islands. For this scenario, the 2050X scenario, they had to add an extra 17 terawatt hours of hydrogen demand each year. That's about half a megaton of hydrogen.
So on top of electrifying its own entire economy, the model now has to find the power for this export demand. What does that do to the infrastructure plan?
It means building more, of course. To meet that export demand, you need an extra 14 GW of renewable generation and an additional 3 GW of electrolyzers, bringing the total electrolyzer park to 21 GW.
An extra 14 GW is not a small number. What does that do to the overall cost? Does exporting make power more expensive for people in New Zealand?
It does, but it's a manageable increase. The extra build-out adds about $0.7 billion to the annual system cost, which is a 12% increase over the domestic-only plan. So the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, goes up a bit, from about €61 per megawatt hour to 68 too.
Which is still incredibly competitive on a global scale. And even though half a megaton isn't a world-breaking number for hydrogen, it proves the concept works.
It absolutely proves the potential is there. The model shows New Zealand has the low-cost renewable resources to become a green fuel exporter. It's a strategic advantage they can choose to leverage.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. Let's just quickly recap the key takeaways.
First, the sheer scale. That 13 times capacity expansion driven by electrifying everything, a total system change. Second, the identity shift. New Zealand becomes a solar nation, with PV providing over 65% of its power.
And third, the storage story. It's a story of using what you have. The existing hydro provides the massive seasonal energy tank, while new high-power batteries act as the fast pumps for daily balancing.
And if you connect all that to future planning, the study pointed out a really interesting limitation. As New Zealand becomes solar dominant, its main grid challenge might shift. They might no longer worry about the old dry year problem, not enough rain for the hydro dams. Instead, they might face something more like Europe's dark doldrums.
Where you have several days or even a week with very little sun and very little wind.
Exactly. It's a completely different kind of reliability challenge. And that raises another question for future work, something this study didn't model. It didn't include demand-side flexibility.
You mean things like smart charging for electric vehicles or getting big industrial users to power down during lulls?
Right. If you include that kind of flexibility from the consumer side, you might find you don't need quite as much of that expensive storage and generation capacity we've been talking about. The numbers in this study could be a conservative upper bound. That's something for you to mull or explore on your own.
A truly fascinating insight into the future. That wraps up our deep dive into the source, optimizing New Zealand's energy transition, introducing Remix NZ's insights into transition pathways and green hydrogen export scenarios.